Hello and welcome back to the Shack Network podcast. I am Andrew. This is Jake. Not going to mess that up this time. So we are back with another NFL edition. We're going to be talking about the NFC today. Jake, how are you? Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
All right. So today I'm going to be sort of moderating the podcast and
Switching roles this time.
doing
Switching
the
roles.
questions. We're going to switch the roles around. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start off with the NFC East. So me being a Dallas Cowboys fan, obviously I know a lot about this division, and I have my thoughts and ideas on where I think it's going to go this year. So my first question, this division is called the worst division in football by many fans and even some experts. So how open do you think this division really is this year?
I don't think it's the worst division in football anymore. I think there are worse divisions that I'm not going to get into. I think it's more talented, and it is very wide open, especially because last year the Eagles made the playoffs with a 9-7 record, and the Cowboys missed out. They were 8-8, but the Cowboys are loaded. Like, you're a huge Cowboys fan. CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, Zeke. Who knows what's going to happen with Dak? But they have Andy Dalton, who could play with that offense too, and they have a pretty good defense. But at the same time, the Eagles are really talented. Carson Wentz was able to do something with nothing last year, and now they brought in Marquise Goodwin, Jalen Reagor at wideout. So they're very talented too. So I think it's wide open between those two teams. I can't really see the Giants or the Redskins really crashing the party.
So I'm going to disagree and say that it's not. I don't think it's open at all, just because there's only two teams that really I think are going to win this division. For a division, for me personally, a more open division, something like the NFC South, where you don't know. The Saints could win it. The Buccaneers could win it. For all we know, the Atlanta Falcons can win it. Matt Ryan's a former MVP. So I think this division is relatively closed. There's only two really good teams who I think are going to compete for the playoff spots this year.
Mm-hmm.
So moving forward, kind of bouncing off that, the last time the NFC East had a repeat champion was 2001, 2, 3, and 4 when the Eagles won the division 4 straight years. What do you think the Eagles have to do to win it again, or do you think they've already done enough to put themselves in a good position to win this division?
I definitely think they put themselves in a good position. I mean, I said that Carson Wentz was able to do something out of nothing. He had no receivers last year and was able to make plays with Greg Ward. And now they added two really speedy wide receivers in Marquise Goodwin, who is still fairly young, and Jalen Reagor, who's their first rounder. And they do have a good defense. And I think Miles Sanders is going to have a breakout year. But I think the Cowboys also had a really good offseason. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, of course. I think the Eagles have done enough. But it really depends on how they play during the season and the injury bug, of course. That's what hurt them last year.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to actually disagree with you. I know this is going to sound super biased, me being a Cowboys fan, but I don't actually think the Eagles did enough to put themselves in a position to move forward. I don't think they took a step back, so to say, but I don't think they took the step forward like the Cowboys did, adding Ha Clinton Dix, adding Gerald McCoy, adding a guy like CeeDee Lamb, bringing in those guys to fortify the offense and the defense. I think the Eagles, they brought in Jalen Reagor, they brought in Marquise Goodwin, but those are not big name guys who you thought big things would come out of. You know, when Goodwin was on the 49ers or Reagor was in college, I didn't even know who Jalen Reagor was when he was playing in college. And I don't know, they didn't really do that much to improve their defense. So I think that they'll compete. I think that they'll be a borderline playoff team. I think that this is the Cowboys division as long as they bring in Dak Prescott and re-sign
Yeah,
him to the big deal.
yeah. As simple as it seems, it all comes down to quarterback play at the end. I think Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, more accurate, rocket for an arm. Dak Prescott's more mobile and takes hits like a man. Wentz gets hurt a lot. It comes down to injuries, but at the same time, the quarterback play. If you put Wentz with the Cowboys receivers, like, imagine what he could do. But it's all about the quarterback in that division right now.
Right. We don't have to get into the talent debate. I think they're two really talented young quarterbacks. Obviously, you know, I think what I think, you think what you think.
Exactly.
No harm in that one. So my third question, who do you think will compete first for, we'll say, a division title at this point? The Giants or the Redskins?
I think it's the Washington Redskins. I think the Washington Redskins are much better on the defensive end. Adding Chase Young, they still have Landon Collins there. They still have a bunch of other players, Ryan Kerrigan. And I think Dwayne Haskins could take that next step. I think he could fly under the radar. He has a rocket for an arm. I mean, the one time I really watched him play, he completed an 80-yard pass to Terry McLaurin, who is their number one wide receiver right now. And they have a couple weapons. And the problem with the Giants, and I always mention this when I talk about the Giants, one, Daniel Jones holds on to the football like a toddler. And two, the Giants' defense is not very strong. And when they're not very strong, you need them to win shootouts. And Daniel Jones had 23 turnovers last year. He needs to cut down on that, or the Giants are just going to keep losing high-scoring games.
Right, that one I definitely agree with. I don't think the Giants have the defense, or other than Barkley and Evan Ingram, who knows what's going to happen with them. I don't really think they have the weapons. I also think Haskins is actually a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. He showed really good flashes of potential. And with a young running back like Darius Geis, a young wide receiver like Terry McLaurin, that's a really promising potential big three for Washington, as much as it pains me to say things like that.
Yeah, agreed. And I also think the Giants made one of the biggest mistakes of the draft. All the mock drafts were saying the Giants were going to get Isaiah Simmons, and they took Andrew Thomas. For a team that has no defense, they should have taken Simmons because he could turn it around or at least get it in the right direction. Thomas is a safe pick, but like you don't know what's going to happen. I think Simmons is going to be a star. I think Thomas is going to be average. So
Right, and we'll definitely get back into that Isaiah Simmons draft pick to Arizona. He's gonna have a big play in my future postseason picks for this year in the NFC. So my final question, this one I really, it's something really relevant. I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but
yeah.
where do you think Jamal Adams goes? Dallas, Philly, somewhere else? Why?
See, the problem, like being a big Jet fan, Jamal Adams was asking for too much. And all of those teams that he put on the list, now 8 because he added the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on there, they don't have the assets for it. I think he'll end up with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys would give up like Anthony Brown, the first and the third. And I'm totally fine with that because the Jets need a corner. But Jamal Adams was asking for too much, and I wish him luck. But I think Dallas. I think it's going to be Dallas.
Yeah, I know you talked a lot about the Texans as well last night.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the Cowboys also. I think they have the assets in Xavier Woods, Jordan Lewis, as you said, Anthony Brown. They have picks. And another thing that really is going to play into this for Dallas, Jerry Jones is getting old, and he wants another Super Bowl before he, passes away, anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, he's not getting any younger. This is the best window the Cowboys have in a really long time, and it's maybe a 3 to 5 year window. And I think that this is the best opportunity.
Yeah. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And I think one of the biggest losses for the Cowboys this year was losing their sack leader in Robert Woods. And Jamal Adams, if they bring him in, he's a great pass rusher, a great blitzer, really disrupts the box. He boxes the quarterback well. So if they could bring him in, it could replace Woods and even be an upgrade over it.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to the next division, and that's the NFC South. So obviously, Tom Brady is in the NFC South now. I'm sure you are delighted to hear
I
something
am
like that. He
delighted to
won't
hear
be
something like that.
tormenting the Jets anymore. So my
Yeah.
first NFC South question is, do the Saints repeat and win the division, or are the Bucs too strong, or maybe is a team like Atlanta too strong for them?
I think the Saints will repeat in the division. I think it's all about chemistry. Tom Brady has chemistry with Rob Gronkowski. But Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they're deep receivers. Brady hasn't had time to throw the deep ball. I mean, Tampa Bay's O-line is decent. They made a good draft pick in Tristan Wirfs, but it might take some time. And the Saints and Bucs play in week 1, and that's where we'll really see. I think the Saints are loaded. Alvin Kamara is a top 5 running back in the league. Michael Thomas is a top 5 wideout in the league, and Drew Brees is a pretty accurate quarterback. They're the same. I don't know who's older. I think Brady's older than Brees by a year. And I think the Saints have a better defense. I think the Bucs have a better rush defense, but I think the Saints have ball hawking safeties like Von Bell, and they have a great cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore. And I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think the Saints do repeat and win the division. So I know this is going to sound a little weird, but I think the Bucs are more poised to win the Super Bowl, but the Saints are more poised to win just the division and not the Super Bowl, if you understand what I mean. I think that a team like Breeze, Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, who is a huge addition, as well as Kamara and the guys that they have, um, I I just see the Saints running this division the way they have the past few years. I don't think that changes this year, but I do think Tom Brady has a better chance to lead the Bucs from the wild card all the way up to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that the NFC, like, teams are less experienced in there, and I feel like a 2C, the 49ers have experience, but if the Seattle Seahawks go up there, or the Philadelphia Eagles go there, I could easily see Tom Brady and all his experience going in there and taking the Bucs on a run.
Right. All right. So moving on, do you think this could be a 4 or a 3 playoff team division with the new format and 3 wild cards and the division winner?
I'm going to say 4. I believe in the Carolina Panthers. First reason is Joe Brady. Joe Brady Look what he did with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's so talented, but he did nothing his junior year without a quarterback coach and designing plays. The Carolina Panthers brought in Joe Brady, and he could design everything. And they have arguably the best running back in football in Christian McCaffrey. In my opinion, he's one of the only running backs that could go for 1,500 rushing yards and 1,500 passing yards. And I think
Receiving
Teddy
yards.
Bridgewater receiving yards. Wow. Oh, sorry.
If he goes for 1,500 passing yards, I think I would lose my mind.
Yeah, true. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is the real deal. So I could see it being a 4 playoff team. I think it really hinges on what the Atlanta Falcons do and how Todd Gurley plays. But it's going to be interesting.
Right. I'm going to have to disagree on that one. I think Carolina is competitive, but I don't think they get in. I feel like they'll still be that, that fourth little brother to the top three big dogs in that division, at least for now until Breeze and Brady are gone. Then their window really expands for me. I think that this is a really young team. They locked up CMC. They added Teddy Bridgewater, who I think is a really nice quarterback. He's still pretty young. I think that adding Robbie Anderson is going to help. They have a guy
Yeah.
like DJ Moore who had a really nice year last year. Again, I think this team will be in the playoff push, but I think they'll barely miss out. I do think that 3 teams will make the playoffs, though. I think Atlanta, is the team that is going to be the third team in this division. I think that adding Gurley for them is really going to help. They have arguably one of the best big threes in the league now, and Matt Ryan, who is still a really good quarterback, Julio Jones, who's arguably the best receiver in the league, and now Todd Gurley, who, when he's been healthy, he's been just an absolute stud for the most of it, better part of his career with the Rams. So I think 3 teams get in. I think Carolina definitely is competitive this year and next year. And if they can get the division without Breeze and Brady, I think that it could be theirs for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So another sort of question that has to do with all 4 teams. Who do you have as an X factor for all 4 teams? I can answer this first if you want to think.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So I think for the Saints, it's got to be Emmanuel Sanders. I think that having that second receiver now with Michael Thomas will definitely open up the field more. I think that Thomas will be able to face less defense, I guess. I don't really know how to put it, but I think that a guy like Sanders really opens up the field for him. For Atlanta, I got to go with Calvin Ridley. Same thing. It's pretty much the same reason. If he could really step up this year, that could be a huge help for Julio Jones, who could increase his play. I could have gone with Todd Gurley here as well, coming into a new system. For the Bucs, Ronald Jones is my guy. I think that if they can establish the running game, the passing game is going to be there. Gronk, Brady, Evans, Godwin, the passing game is going to be there. If
Mm-hmm.
they can have a really good run game, there's nothing that could beat that team. And for the Panthers, I know he had a great year last year. It might not seem like an X factor. I got to go with DJ Moore. I think that if he could step up as that number 1 target for Teddy Bridgewater, they could really gel together and become a really, really good team in a couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with all that. So for New Orleans, I'm going to go with Demario Davis. He's the field general on defense, middle linebacker, great player, was a Jet for a couple of years, but really coming out with the Saints. And in this division with high-flying offenses, Matt Ryan is always up there in passing yards, Drew Brees and Tom Brady, of course, and Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey down in Carolina, all pretty good offenses. And if Davis could stop a touchdown once in a while and force a fumble and get an interception and lead his defense to play better, that might be an X factor for the Saints. For the Bucs, I have Shaq Barrett. I'm sticking with the defense. Defense wins championships. Barrett led the league in sacks last year, and he's a monster off the edge. Again, Bucs are going to be high scoring. Brady, Evans, Godwin, Gronk. I don't really need to go into that. But if Barrett could get a couple sacks and make a few plays for his defense, might be an X factor. For the Carolina Panthers, I have to go with my boy Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson is the type of wide receiver that blows the top off of any defense. He has speed that's unmatched. Only Tyreek Hill's faster, in my opinion. But Teddy Bridgewater's not that type of quarterback. He can't throw a ball 50 yards in the air. So Robbie needs to work on his route running and slants and digs. And get better with that in order to be that coveted number 2, because he is competing with Curtis Samuel, who I think is a very good player and will beat Robbie out for number 2. And then I have to go with Todd Gurley in Atlanta. Always injury prone, but when he's at his best and when he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best.
Right, so you definitely went with more of a defensive route for a couple of those really big, powerful teams. I definitely think that those defensive guys have all the opportunities to really lead their teams and be an insanely big part of possibly Super Bowl for either of those teams, the Bucs or the Saints. So my final question This one definitely a little sad to talk about. Do you think this could be the last ride for the legendary quarterback Drew Brees?
I think it is the last ride for Drew Brees. I think Taysom Hill is one of the most coveted backups in the NFL, even though he doesn't play quarterback 50% of the time. I think that Sean Payton loves him. I think there are quarterbacks coming up in the next draft. It's a deep quarterback draft if you look at it. And I think Drew Brees is getting older. The Bucks are in the division, and the Bucks could replace Brady in 2 years and be fine. And Brady's going to be there for 2 years. And Breeze just hasn't been the same. I mean, in his last game, the Minnesota game, he had a lot of throws with where they were open receivers, but he underthrew them. I think it is the last ride for Drew Brees, as sad as he is. He's a legend, but I think it's going to be the change of the guard, and I think Taysom Hill is going to take over.
Right. So I think so as well. I think that, Breeze he's 41. Um, I don't know how much longer he's going to keep playing, especially he's still playing at a pretty high level. So I think that even if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, I know how much of a competitor that he is. He might just want to go out with a really nice year. I'm going to really strongly disagree. I don't think Taysom Hill is the answer. I don't think he can throw accurately at all. I think he can run. He can catch a little bit, but I don't think he's the guy at quarterback. Is there a special, like a certain reason you think he should be the next guy in New Orleans?
I think that when you look at the quarterbacks in this league that are so good, like Lamar Jackson, who just won MVP, like we talked about this in our AFC podcast, Lamar Jackson gets hit a lot, and he's fine right now, but you never know if he's going to get hurt. Taysom Hill can run downfield better than Lamar Jackson if you look at it and look at the plays he runs. And it's all about training. If you go work on that accuracy a bit, because it's fine. He makes deep throws. He had a couple in the Minnesota game. He had a couple through the season that I can't really name. But if they believe in him, there must be something that they're seeing.
Right, and I remember the throw from the Minnesota game. I remember watching that game, and it should have been a touchdown, and he just couldn't
Yeah,
reach. It was just short. That was definitely one thing that kind of caught my eye, and I was like, I don't think this guy is the quarterback of the future for New Orleans or really any team. I think he's a number two. He's a really cool player in the sense that he plays all these different positions and he does so much for the Saints offense, which is definitely very important. And I think he could be a really nice factor in that offense, but I just don't think he's going to be their guy going forward personally.
yeah. One final note with Drew Brees, I think if Alvin Kamara has the season of his life, it's not going to be Drew Brees' last ride, but Alvin Kamara has to have like the season of his life.
Right. I could
Yeah,
definitely see Kamara having a big year, definitely influencing Drew Brees. And I think if they win the Super Bowl, he retires right on the spot.
totally, totally agree.
So the next division, NFC North. And, this might be a division that you might have some fun with too. Now you're going to Michigan. The Detroit Lions are out there, your
Yeah.
boys, as we like to say. So the first question actually does have to do with them. And I have a really big paragraph here that I'm going to read off of after I ask this question. So as I was kind of taking some notes, looking for some questions to ask, I read something on Pro Football Focus, which is obviously a big football website,
Yep.
that said the Lions might have the best roster in the NFC North. And I thought about it for a second. And I was like, I don't know, maybe. Well, what do you think about that?
The best is a stretch. Second best, I'd say yes. Oh wow, that rhymed. But I think the Lions made one of the best picks in the draft and the safest pick in the draft is Jeff Okuda. Jeff Okuda, I hated him last year because I'm going to Michigan, but now I love him because he's the Detroit Lion and I'm going to go to his games. But Okuda had zero pass interferences and zero holdings last year, playing against the best competition. I mean, practiced against Justin Fields, who's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and played against Trevor Lawrence. And he played brilliant in that game. And the Lions, if you look at them, Matt Stafford's still very serviceable. And when he's good, he could be like elite. He makes those throws. And Kenny Galladay is a star number one, and above average number one wide receiver when you look around the league. And then Marvin Jones is an above average number two. And I think Kerryon Johnson could have a big year. I think they are very talented. They also have a pretty good O-line with Taylor Decker. Oh my God, these names are popping out of my head, but they have a good O-line. And their run defense is good. They still have Damon Harrison out there. They lost Darius Slay, but they could get some more corners. And I mentioned it. I just flew out of my head, but they got Okuda to replace Slay. So I think they're the second most talented. I don't know who I'd say is the most, though.
So yeah, as I read it, at first I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I started to like think about who they added this year, and I was like, it's really not that far off. I think Minnesota's got a really, in terms of straight talent on paper, I think Minnesota's got a really talented roster. Cousins, Cook, Thielen, all those boys, they have a pretty good defense as well. But Detroit was really competitive when Stafford played. As you said, Stafford can definitely be an elite quarterback when he plays, and I think the weapons he has will definitely help him allow that. They were up 24-6 on Arizona. Their defense kind of blew that game, and they didn't even lose. They ended up just tying. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Eagles. They lost by 1 to Green Bay. They were up 9, so the defense blew that game as well. And the defense is now improved with Okuda.
They were the
And that
only yeah. They were the only defense that didn't let Patrick Mahomes score a touchdown on them.
right, they played Kansas City really, really well. Um, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. All right, so they lost to 1 by Green Bay, and that game, the officials were extremely scrutinized after that game, which was one of the big things that I was reading. They beat the Giants. They lost to the Raiders by 7 on a game-winning touchdown with 2 minutes remaining. So again, they did add on the defense, which sort of seemed to be their weak point. They added Okuda. They added a former Super Bowl champion, Jamie Collins. They added Danny
Exactly.
Shelton, Reggie Ragland. I think this team could definitely compete for a playoff spot. And, we never know with the Lions. They could honestly compete for their division this year. I really wouldn't be that surprised to see that. I think they do have a lot of talent on that roster.
Agreed.
So next up, a team that nobody really knows about ever, the Chicago Bears. What do you think about a bounce back season for the Bears with Trubisky or Nick Foles possibly?
I'm really high on the Bears. I think Allen Robinson is going to have a huge bounce back year. I think he's a great wide receiver. I think Trubisky or Foles, whoever it is, they're going to be serviceable enough to throw their weapons. And I think Tariq Cohen has something on his back, a chip on his shoulder that he could really build off of. And I think David Montgomery is a good running back. But they're not called the monsters of the Midway because of their offense. It's because of the defense. Khalil Mack, Eddie Jackson, Roquan Smith, all studs. That if they could play well and be that defense like they were 2 years ago, or be compared to the 85 Bears, I think they will have a massive bounce back year.
Right. So I fully disagree with this. I think Mitchell Trubisky is a terrible quarterback. I don't think he can make any throws. He really can. He's never really proven anything. I think Nick Foles has more to prove than any quarterback in the world right now because he has struggled everywhere that he's played besides Philly. I know their defense is good. Allen Robinson's a good receiver. They have decent running backs. I just don't see it out of the Bears. I don't think they'll compete for the playoffs. I think they're the 4th team in this division, especially with all the additions the Lions made. I just really can't see Trubisky working out at this point. I think he struggled too much. And Foles, you really never know because he was really not good in St. Louis or in Kansas City. And even in Jacksonville, they got rid of him after 1 year. They didn't see enough in him to keep him there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Foles is going to have a bounce back year if he plays, but I think Trubisky is the main guy there right now. And I think Trubisky, with all the criticism, I think he's fine. I think he's below average, but if he can hit some of these throws, because their receivers do get open, Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, Tariq Cohen's a great receiving back. And if the defense can put him in good field position, they could win games.
Right, but we've never really seen Trubisky make these throws. Like, what makes you think he's going to start doing it all of a sudden? And this is his 4th year, I think, in the league.
It's his 4th year in the league. Yeah, I mean, the 2nd year in the league, he was able to show it. I mean, the Bears were 13-3 or 12-4, and
But they were carried by the defense that year. Carried by the defense that year.
Carried by the defense, but Miss Trubisky still threw for 20-something touchdowns, I think, which is pretty good when, like, my quarterback, who I think is much better, is Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold hasn't thrown for 20 touchdowns in a year.
Yeah, right. So you see more out of Trubisky than I do. I don't see anything really big for the Bears this year or really anytime soon. So my next question, literally it's 6 words. Jordan Love, what do you think?
They saw the upside, but didn't see any of the downside. He makes questionable throws. He's the quote unquote, he could be the next Mahomes because he has the arm, but he throws so many questionable throws and so many interceptions. And Aaron Rodgers has 4 more years left in the tank. So Jordan Love, that will almost be his rookie contract. And it's just hard to see him beating out Aaron Rodgers because Rodgers is still playing at a high level. I mean, if you look at Jordan Love and all that he did, like all that made him good and made him such a high draft pick, his arm, his scrambling. Aaron Rodgers has one of the biggest and one of the most accurate arms in the league. And they said Jordan Love can scramble really well. Aaron Rodgers is very evasive in the pocket and very hard to take down. I just don't see why they take Jordan Love based on what Aaron Rodgers has left.
Right, me too. I just don't know why they would pass on a wide receiver when Adams is literally the only target for Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly.
I don't see Rodgers even staying there at this point. No, I've talked about other guys leaving, Deshaun Watson and stuff like that, but a guy like Rodgers, I see him just kind of pulling a Brett Favre and wanting his way out, especially because they're definitely going to start grooming a guy like Jordan Love the same way they did Rodgers with Brett Favre.
I don't know if Rodgers is going to want out. I think it's just going to add more fuel to the tank. I mean, he hasn't spoken much to the media during the offseason, but he has said that it's giving him more motivation. And I think that Aaron Rodgers has a best friend in the backfield in Aaron Jones and a second best friend in the backfield in Jamal Williams. And I think Rodgers doesn't have to be like prime Aaron Rodgers in order for the Packers to come out of this division. They have two great pass rushers on defense with Zadarius and Preston Smith. The Smith brothers had over 20 combined sacks last year. They have Darnell Savage as their and Jair Alexander, so they have a good defense. So sort of like the Bears, you don't need a great quarterback to come out of this division, but we know Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback.
I just don't know how they expect to sit Jordan Love for 4 years.
Neither do I.
That's what I think is going to want to make Rodgers push his way out, because I think they're going to have to start Jordan Love in 2 or 3 years. Aaron Rodgers, he's no spring chicken at this point, and I just think this is going to worsen his relationship with Matt LaFleur, which I heard was kind of shaky, even though they were very good last year. So I definitely think that this will cause some issues in Green Bay and could potentially end up being the beginning of the end for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I don't think this is the beginning of the end for his career. I think he can definitely find a new home and be absolutely loved the way he is in Green Bay. But this pick just still, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, crazy.
So my last question for this division: what is your ceiling for the Vikings without Stephon Diggs now?
I think their ceiling is a wild card team. I'm not high on the Vikings. I think Kirk Cousins is a fine quarterback, but when I look at that division, I think he's the third best quarterback in it, behind Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. I think Dalvin Cook is the second best running back in the division. I think Aaron Jones has a better year. I think Aaron Jones is a better receiving back and has more touchdowns. I think their defense is okay. They have Anthony Harris, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, but we talked about the Lions defense. They added stuff. I talked about the Packers defense with the Smith brothers, Darnell Savage, Jair Alexander, and the Bears defense, of course. So I think the Vikings have the worst defense in the division. And I think Kirk Cousins is an average quarterback, and now he's losing Stephon Diggs, who's a number one wide receiver.
So I'm going to disagree with you on this one. My ceiling is the 2 seed in the NFC, and here's why. I'll explain it. So people say Kirk Cousins can't win big games, right? Can't win primetime. He beat the Saints on the road in the playoffs.
One big game. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
But that's a bigger game. That's the biggest game he's ever played in, arguably. And he went into New Orleans, the loudest building in the NFL, beat them in overtime on the road. That's a huge win. That's a confidence booster going into next year. I know they gave up Diggs, but they brought in Justin Jefferson, and he could be solid. This team could be so dangerous. They added Michael Pierce to a defense that's already pretty solid. And they still have guys like Thielen, Cook, Kyle Rudolph. I think that the ceiling, the top that they'll get, will be the 2 seed in the NFC. I don't think they'll get there. I think they'll be borderline division, wild card sort of team. I think they will end up missing out, but it'll be close. But I think that the best that they can do would be a 2 seed in the NFC. I think that they are built for a good year this year. I think that although they did lose Diggs, I think that they're really poised for a big year.
I just think when you look at what they have and look at that division with the Lions, Bears, and Packers, in all the categories, quarterback, running back, maybe wide receiver, they have the best in the division. But if you look at all those categories, I don't know if they're the best in the division in something. You could argue running back with Dalvin Cook, but I think Aaron Jones is better than Dalvin. Okay, so you could think running back.
I would say running back.
Okay, so there's a couple things you could argue.
Yeah. And I'd probably say tight end also. I think Kyle Rudolph's the best tight end in that division. Not that I mean, it's Jimmy Graham in Chicago. I don't even know who is the tight end in Green Bay. and it doesn't matter because Aaron Rodgers never throws to the tight end, and I
Yeah,
don't
he
think
doesn't.
T.J. Hawkinson has shown anything.
Okay, so you could argue tight end. I don't think the defense though. I think Green Bay has better corners. I think Chicago has better linebackers, and I think there's a better D line in Detroit. So defense wins championships, and a tight end and a running back. You need a quarterback, and you need wide receivers. And Justin Jefferson is a project. I think it'll be good in 2 years, but next year is a bit hard to see, especially because it's very hard to learn the playbook right now with these virtual offseason workouts. And Adam Thielen, borderline number one right now.
I think I would take Kirk Cousins over Matthew Stafford. I know Stafford and Cousins, they're definitely, different quarterbacks. Cousins is more of a compact guy. Stafford likes to kind of air it out. Um, Neither of them have shown me much in big games, but Cousins, that win against the Saints, that's such a tough team to beat, and the fact that they were able to go into the Saints' house, which is just so loud. I've been to a game in the Superdome, and it was a regular season game, and it was the loudest building I've ever heard in my entire life, besides big Yankee playoff games, and it's inside. It's such a tough place to play for any opposing team, and I think Kirk Cousins handled that so well. They fumbled on the first drive, and he was able to really rally the troops, and that defense is still very, very solid. I know they might not be number one in categories, but as a collective,
Yeah,
I think that they're the
solid.
most talented roster in this division.
I also think they're going to have a harder schedule. I mean, they came in second, so they're going to have to play Seattle, which is I think that's a loss. I think Seattle's a very talented team, and they're going to have to play Dallas, who's much improved, and they're going to have to play who was second in the oh my gosh, I'm losing myself. Second in the West. They're going to have to play Atlanta, who we said was better too. I just think the Vikings schedule is harder too. So,
Right. Right. I'm just
mhm.
saying that's what I think is their top ceiling. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I just have them missing, maybe one spot out, but I do think that they have a lot of potential in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So, final division is the NFC West, and for me, this is one of the most intriguing divisions in football because there are four teams who can make the playoffs this year, I think. For the Cardinals, they got DeAndre Hopkins, arguably the best receiver in the league. I think he's the best receiver in the league. To add to Kenyon Drake, Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, can they leapfrog LA, Seattle, or even San Francisco?
They could leapfrog LA. LA's easy. LA's on down. Sean McVay's a great coach. Jared Goff's not a great quarterback. Robert Woods is old. They lost Brandon Cooks. Aaron Donald's probably the most talented player in the league, maybe Patrick Mahomes. But LA's just going down, and I don't see their floor is really low. Seattle, I'm really high on Seattle. Seattle, it's their defense. Their defense was the problem last year. But I think Jakeem Griffin is the number one corner. They have Quandre Diggs. They have a couple more players, Bobby Wagner. And I think their defense is going to be a breaking point between them and Arizona. And San Francisco is a weird one. I don't think they can leapfrog San Francisco. I think they're too talented all around. Murray's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think the running game is better in San Francisco. And DeAndre Hopkins is better than all of those San Francisco receivers combined. But it's defense, and San Francisco doesn't need to pass the ball that much. They showed that last year. They were able to go 13-3 and not pass the ball as much.
Yeah. Right. So this is probably pretty bold. I think they will finish second in the division. I am very high in Seattle as well. I think they leapfrog San Francisco and LA. As hard as it seems to hear, San Francisco went to the Super Bowl last year. I think that this offense with three really good receivers in the best
Four.
receiver in the league, DeAndre Hopkins. Right. Who's the fourth?
Andy is
Who are
Andy
you?
is
You are
Andy.
considering Isabella the fourth?
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I'm just for now. I'm just going to leave it at three because you usually see three receivers on the field.
Yeah.
Hopkins, Fitzgerald, who I know he's old, but he's still as consistent as ever,
Still can play.
and Christian Kirk, who was really good this past year. I think Kenyon Drake is a really good running back for that system. I think he showed that. Late in the season, he really started to step it up. I think San Francisco didn't necessarily get much better. They gave up DeForest Buckner. They got rid of Matt Breida. They let Emmanuel Sanders walk. And Isaiah Simmons, I know he's one guy, but he's supposed to be this transcendent talent. And I think bringing him into Arizona is going to massively improve that defense.
Yeah, I mean, Simmons is a great linebacker, and they have Chandler Jones, and they have Buda Baker and Patrick Peterson. But I think that the Niners, I mean, they replaced DeForest Buckner with Javon Kinlaw. And I saw Buckner's draft card because I like Oregon football, and Kinlaw's draft card might have had the most upside in a while. And Kinlaw's just coming in to replace him. And they still have Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and Dee Ford, who are great pass rushers. So a big loss for San Francisco is Deebo Samuel, breaking his foot. But I think that their
He
defense is
should be
just
back though.
massively. He should be back, but it said 12 to 16 weeks, but I don't know. And I
Right,
just think
and you
that
never know with a broken foot that can definitely affect somebody long term, longer than people would
exactly.
think.
Exactly. I just think San Francisco is more talented than Arizona. I think they have a better coach. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a good coach, but I think Kyle Shanahan is elite now.
Right, so that's definitely one spot that we differ. I'm sure we'll differ going into the postseason
Yeah,
picks.
you should see
Number
my bold
two,
prediction. I have a bold prediction after. You'll see
number two, yeah,
it.
that one's mine for this year. Arizona is better than San Francisco. So my number two question: is there any chance of a bounce back season for the Rams? They still have Aaron Donald. They still have Jared Goff. They got rid of a couple of guys. What do you think about that?
I went into this already. I'm so low on the Rams. I think they are not a good football team. I don't think they're talented. I think they didn't gain anything. They lost it. They replaced Brandon Cooks with Van Jefferson. Robert Woods is old. Jared Goff is a serviceable quarterback, but below average, in my opinion. You watch their games, they missed a lot of throws last year. I think Aaron Donald's a stud, and I think Jalen Ramsey's a stud. But if you look at the rest of their defense, there are some holes that need to be filled. I like Corey Littleton, but when you compare him to Isaiah Simmons or Bobby Wagner or Fred Warner, it's really hard to see that. And the Rams, just like their uniforms, are trash.
That's funny. So yeah, I don't really believe in the Rams much either. I don't think Goff is that good. I really don't think he's a stud. Not worth the money they paid him. I think losing Gurley and Cooks are only going to hurt him this year. I know Cooks is very injury prone and Gurley is at times too, but I just can't see any good coming out of losing those guys and Clay Matthews as well.
Yeah.
So moving on, is this the best division in football with those top three teams and the Rams who did go 7-9, 9-7 last year?
I think it's the NFC South. I think if you compare these divisions, you have three mega talented teams. You have the Cardinals, the Seahawks, and the Niners in this one. You have the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Saints in this one. And I think Carolina Panthers are immensely better than the LA Rams on the defensive side and the offensive side of the ball. And I think if you put San Francisco or Seattle against New Orleans, they'd beat them. I think the NFC West. Oh wait, I said that wrong. Wow. I think
You
New
think the Saints
Orleans.
would win?
I think the Saints would win. I mean, the
Right.
Niners won last year in the game of the year against the Saints, but
Absolutely, yeah.
The Saints have a good defense. And why do you think Emmanuel Sanders wanted to leave? He went to a team that he thought was going to
A
be
better
better.
a better team.
Exactly. And Tom Brady's only going to help the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers had one of the best receiving cores and the number one rush defense in the league last year. And I think the Carolina Panthers are just immensely better than the LA Rams.
Right. So I don't think it's the best division, but I do think it's really, really close. I think there are a bunch of very good divisions, and I think the NFC South does have the crown with just the stacked offenses and the very good defenses they have out there. This one's really good, though, and it's definitely going to be a fun playoff push this year. So my last question, how good do you think Jimmy G has to be to win this division?
Serviceable, mid, 15th to 16th best quarterback in the NFL when you have that defense and you have those weapons and you could always give the ball to Raheem the Dream Mostert or Tevin Coleman or flip it to Deebo Samuel, who probably will be back, or give it to a couple other weapons that they have. But that team is made on defense, and Robert Saleh will be a head coach in 2 years. You heard it here first. And Kyle Shanahan is an elite coach. And Jimmy Garoppolo in the Super Bowl, he played like he was a horrible quarterback. If he played like he was a good quarterback, the 49ers would have been Super Bowl champions. So he has to play average in order for them to be good.
Right, so this is another thing I definitely disagree with you on. I think he's going to have to be incredible, and here's why. I seriously believe this. The teams know. So a couple years ago when the Dallas Cowboys had Des Bryant as their number one receiver and then he left, they would stack the box because they knew that the Cowboys were going to give the ball to Zeke and let him run. They would stack the box over and over and over again, and it would work. The Cowboys were losing games until Amari Cooper came in, spread the field, and the Cowboys, went to the playoffs. They had a huge run at the end of the year. I think that this is going to be a similar situation with the Niners this year. I think losing Matt Breida, who shortens the running back list to two real guys, I think that teams are going to come in, stack the box, and say, you have to throw the football or else we're going to beat you because we are not going to let you run it on us. And I think that's the best way to beat the 49ers because I don't know if Jimmy can make these throws, especially losing a guy like Sanders is definitely gonna hurt. And I know George Kittle is an absolute stud. He is one of the best tight ends in the league. I think he's second best right behind Kelsey. I don't know if he can carry the entire load on that offense. I know Deebo Samuel's going to be back. I know they have guys, but he's still not may not be 100%. And I think that I know they got Trent Williams as well, who will help. But I just think that Jimmy G is going to have to really take a major step forward and not just be a service quarterback. He's going to have to be a great quarterback this year and make throws to win games because teams are not going to let them run the football constantly, like especially the way they did in the playoffs.
Yeah, I like your argument. That's like the Bill Belichick specialty. That's why he gave Sam Darnold so much trouble because, like, Des Bryant for the Cowboys couldn't beat anybody in one-to-one coverage because he was getting older. I think that's different with the Niners, though. I think the Niners, Debo's quick, Kittle's very good in one-on-one. And if the teams choose to stack the box and stop the run, I think that the Niners have quick receivers and they have one of the best tight ends in the league in George Kittle. They'll get open and Jimmy could give them 10-yard throws and then they could rack him for 10 more yards. So I think Jimmy has to be average and just make the throws when he has to and not do what bad quarterbacks do and just throw it away.
Right, and you could see that in the Super Bowl that I guess there was some pressure that sort of got to the 49ers as a team. They ended up blowing that lead. Once the Chiefs started getting momentum, it was just over. They couldn't move the ball in offense. You could see the Chiefs wanted to stop the run, and they did. When a team wants something the way the Chiefs wanted to stop the run in that Super Bowl, they're going to get it. And that's a problem for a team like the 49ers. And that's why I think Jimmy G has to really step up so much because he's going to have to make those throws. It's not going to be a matter of one throw and he's going to win the game. He's going to have to make those because teams are going to stack the box from the beginning in the first quarter, not just the way the Chiefs did once they started getting on that big comeback.
Yeah, I could see that. Also, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people tell me that Jimmy Garoppolo has experience because he has a couple of rings. He sat on the bench with Tom Brady when Tom
That's
Brady was
absolutely
playing.
not experience.
That's not experience at all, and that's why the Niners didn't win the Super Bowl last year. I think Jimmy needs to be average, but when they get deeper into the season, because if you look at that team on paper, they are a Super Bowl contender. So when they
Right.
play a team like the Baltimore Ravens or the Kansas City Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills or any of those teams in the AFC, or once you get into the playoffs and play the Saints, the Packers, who all have good cornerbacks, Jimmy will have to make those throws. But I think he needs to be average in the regular season in order to get there because they do play some weaker teams.
All right, so that's definitely a spot that I'm sure we will talk about again in the near future, even, off air, talking about Jimmy G and the 49ers. So
Exactly.
we are going to sort of start to wrap things up. And as we did last week, we went through our playoff picks. So I'll give mine first. In no particular order, I've got the NFC East, I have the Cowboys. The NFC South, I've got the Saints. The North, the Packers. And the West, I have the Seahawks. And my three wildcard teams, these are definitely very, very arguable, and I am very happy to make my arguments why. If anybody out there listening has any arguments, we would love to hear them. Let us know who you think will make the playoffs. My wildcard teams are the Buccaneers, the Cardinals, and the Atlanta Falcons.
I like that. I think the Falcons are a pretty good team. I don't have them there, and I totally blanked out on the Buccaneers, to be honest. But I agree with all these. I'm gonna give my picks. There are some things that I actually have that I disagree with, and I'll say why. I mean, my similarities. I have the Packers and the Seahawks. I'm really high on the Seahawks, and I'm pretty high on the Packers. I have them winning the North and the West. I have the Philadelphia Eagles winning the NFC East. I think Carson Wentz is a much better quarterback than Dak Prescott, and I think they have a decent defense. We could argue this after, but I think the Eagles are a better team than the Cowboys, and I think they have more experience because they won last year. I think did you have the Saints winning the division?
Yes.
Oh, so actually that is another similarity. I do have the Saints winning the division, but I think it's going to be a close one with the Buccaneers. And then my three wildcard teams. So my first is the 49ers. I think the 49ers, Jimmy G needs to be average. We just went over that. Great
Right.
defense, good weapons, George Kittle, great coach. I'd see them getting in. I have the Dallas Cowboys as one of my wildcard teams. And That's pretty simple. Talented, Cooper, Lamb, Prescott will play. Even if he doesn't, Dalton will be fine. And I actually don't have the Buccaneers making the playoffs. I said it was going to be close, but my boldest prediction, and I can't wait to hear all the backlash I get from this. I think that the Washington Redskins make the playoffs. I think the Washington Redskins.
I will bet you all the money that you want that the Redskins don't make the playoffs. Like, you can name any amount of straight cash, and I will give it to you if the Redskins make the playoffs. And I'll
Well,
give you like 50-1 odds.
Well, I love betting, and hear me out. I think Dwayne Haskins is a pretty good quarterback. I think he'll be like Josh Allen was. I think they have an above-average defense. I think they have Chase Young. They have a couple other pass rushers and a good linebacking core, Ryan Kerrigan. They have Landon Collins there still. I can see them making a run, and I think the NFC East, Philly and Dallas are good teams, but you get 2 free wins against the Giants. I don't think the Giants are a good team at all, and they came in last place last year, I'm pretty sure. And I think they'll have an easier schedule, and I think they'll beat out the Buccaneers.
I don't think we have enough time to move forward on this. I just can't see the Buccaneers missing the playoffs. They're just too stacked on offense. I can't see Brady missing the playoffs. It's Brady. You can't bet against Brady, because the second you bet against Brady, Brady kills you. Anybody betting against Brady in the Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Rams, he beat him.
Yeah,
I know it was an ugly game, a low-scoring game, but it's Brady. You can't bet against Brady.
No, I bet against him. I also hate him, but I think the Redskins are talented. I think the Bucs are stacked on offense, but you never know when something could happen. You never know.
Right. There's obviously anything is possible at any time. So we are going to wrap things up. There will be one final edition of the NFL podcast. It will be a playoff edition. We will talk about our playoff picks, and there will be a lot more discussion about that Washington Redskins postseason pick. I hope you wrote that down, because that is definitely something to leave on paper if it happens. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to check out theodshack.com for new content very, very often, pretty much daily, I think, at this point. I'm Andrew. That's Jake. Have a good one, guys.